Alright, so I just woke up, but my spare time is limited, so we're just gonna go for it now. Anyway, in my spare time, I tutor this little girl in reading and writing, and she's really young and she's not really into reading yet. It's like just a chore for her. She's stuck reading like boring books for school most of the time, and she doesn't want to really be doing it. So one of my self-appointed jobs is convincing her that reading is a skill she wants to have, and that reading unlocks a magical world of books and stories that she'll never get enough of. So every time I meet with her, I always indulge her in reading her favorite story. This is a very long-winded way of saying that I have read The Fox Who Travels so many times that it is not funny anymore. It has ruined my life. I unironically quote it every day, especially, well, we shall see what we shall see. And I've started poking holes in a story meant for 5-year-olds. Like, why is it called The Fox Who Travels? Traveling is not a central part of the story. Why is the fox our protagonist, but then he will gleefully discuss kidnapping a child and then roasting said child for his dinner? Is the story more nuanced than I thought it was? Are we introducing the concept of the anti-hero this early on for children? Will her mother ever forgive me for giving her this copy of this book? How has she not noticed that there is an entire page missing from it, from when he meets the farmer to when the farmer opens his bag? Anyway, for the uninitiated, The Fox Who Travels is about a fox who wants to con his way into a good dinner. So he starts with trapping a bee into a bag. He asks someone to watch the bag without opening it. Guy opens it, gets the better of him, and then he's like, okay, well, you open my bag, so I lost my bee, so I get your hen now. And this repeats until he meets a woman with her son, and she says, same thing. Please don't open my bag, please just watch it for me. A woman opens his bag, his pig gets away, and then he kidnaps her son and says, a hen is a good supper, a pig is a better supper, but a little boy is the best supper of all. So he takes the boy into the woods, and he gets fire for his cooking his dinner. But lo and behold, a hunter comes by, he hears the little boy crying when the fox went away. He saves the boy, he puts his dog in the bag, and then when the fox comes back, he declares, now let me see, the fat little boy will be my supper. But when he opens the bag, guess what happens? The dog jumps out, and then the dog chases him all the way through the forest, and the hunter's like, okay, now I'll take you home to your mom, kid. This was really fun terrorizing this fox, the way he terrorized you. The fox gets chased all the way into a hole, and then the dog, I guess, leaves him alone or something, and then the fox is just sitting at the hole, and he's like, bemoaning how greedy he was, and he's like, now I don't even have a bee for my supper. So I guess he might starve to death, I don't know. I've read it so many times. Now this is probably this girl's favorite story, and there's actually a lot of reasons why children would like this story. One of them is because there's less than 100 different words used throughout the story, which makes it really good for new readers because it's repetitive and there's a rhythm to it, so you can really get in the swing of it. But she also clearly likes the storyline because, See Jane Run is also repetitive and easy. So one day I asked her, well, why do you like this story so much? Or what's your favorite part of the story? And she says her favorite part's when the boy gets kidnapped. And I asked, oh, so did you want him to eat the little boy? And she says, no, he's cute, I'm happy he's safe. I just like watching the fox kidnap. Anyway, I think of this story a lot because I have to read it so often. And when that's coupled with my general interests in the dark childhood, stranger danger paranoia, and a horror movie that I just got to watch, I have a lot of thoughts that I'm going to make sense of. So, in my spare time, I like to go to matinee movies, and yesterday, I've been torn between going to see Elvis or The Black Phone. I was hesitant to see The Black Phone because I was excited to see it and I was afraid it was going to let me down. Elvis, I was like, I'll be here for no matter how good or bad it is. It sounds kind of ironically fantastic, but it also sounded long. The Black Phone had to be good though because it was touching on all of my favorite subjects. It's got horror, it has the abduction narrative, it has the idyllic and dangerous childhood of suburban children from the 70s. And oh my god, I am so happy to say that that movie was absolutely fantastic. Now for the uninitiated, The Black Phone is about a boy named Finney who's kidnapped by a sadistic mass killer known as the Grabber. He's locked up in this soundproof room where there's a black phone and it's supposedly not working, but Finney gets calls on it from the Grabber's past victims. And they're basically just doing what they can to help him figure out how he can escape. There's also this subplot with his psychic sister that I could have done without. I hate psychic plot lines. They're always like, just do ex machina your way out of a situation. I hate them. But, you know, I also didn't like it because to me the heart of the movie and the stuff that I remember most, granted I saw it yesterday, but I already forgot the psychic sister mostly. What I remember most and what the heart of the movie is Finney, and when we're trapped with Finney. Because Finney he's 13 years old, he's clever, and he's resilient, but he's also young and helpless. The camera's great at emphasizing his tiny little build and his baby face and how young he is. And then that's in contrast to the monstrously tall and thickly built Ethan Hawke, and you feel like there's no way he's gonna get out of this. There's no way he can save himself. Also, I don't know where I'm gonna get to say this, but I really loved Ethan Hawke's wearing a devil mask as the Grabber. It's just great because they're supernatural, the phone's supernatural, but the Grabber itself is not supernatural, but he is not human. It's so good. And it's also fascinating that the mask changes slightly throughout the movie. It's basically a two-piece mask. There's this part covers like your nose to the devil horns, and then there's like a frowny face that covers like this much. Sometimes he wears the whole effect. First time they meet, he's wearing the whole effect. Sometimes he wears only the mouth, and when he wears the mouth, he acts very childish and very young and almost nice. I say nice in asterisks. He talks about wanting to free Finney at times when he wears only the mouth. And then when he wears just the eyes and the horns, he's like channeling an abusive father who just wants to hurt Finney. And to me, this is kind of comparable, like a visual imagery for what it's like to grow up with an abusive parent from a child's perspective, because the changing masks, you never know who you're dealing with that day. You can't really track the emotions, they're ever changing, they're quicksand, they're impossible to ever understand. Now, in my other spare time, because I have a lot of spare time, so I have to use it, obviously, I like to write stories about kids trying to escape dangerous situations. My big project is a 2-book series where in the first book, a boy is kidnapped and raised by his abductor and groomed to believe that they're a legitimate family and that there's nowhere else to go, and a lot of other stuff happens, and I hope it gets published one day, but oh boy, do literary agents just love telling me that they're rejecting me because the market is too saturated, and the market is too demanding, and the market is too selective, and the way they describe this precious market makes me think of that scene in South Park with the beheaded chicken determining what to do with the economy or something. I kind of forgot, I haven't seen that episode in a really long time, and sometimes I think I should just self-publish, but oh my god, I'm afraid like I'll fail at promoting and I'll fail at marketing, and oh my god, the market has me too. Anyway, okay, my point was that the protagonist in my piece is a boy. And I submitted the first chapter for my MFA workshop way back when. And one of the girls in the class asked me, well, why did you pick why did you pick a boy as your protagonist? And she didn't mean it like it was a bad thing or a good thing. She was just naturally curious, like, well, if you're a woman, so why are you writing about a boy instead of a girl? And I don't quite remember what I said at the time. I think I said something like, well, you know, it's inspired partly by Stephen Stainer's story, and also because I feel that the gender dynamics work well. Like, for instance, I don't think people would be immediately suspicious that a father is abusing his son in that type of way if they see a devoted parent to a timid child. I think if it was a girl, you'd be more quick to pick up on something because people are usually quicker to see a girl as a victim than a boy. Anyway, I bring this all up because when I was watching The Black Phone, I realized that all of the grabber's victims were very intentionally young boys. The kidnappings themselves seemed kind of unplanned, like he's just driving around until he finds a child all alone. But he also intentionally looks for a boy that he can play Naughty Boy with. Naughty Boy is a game which is really just catch the boy trying to escape and then beat them and eventually kill them. I find a few things fascinating by this. One, what the heck are the grabber's motivations? They're never clear. Like, why does he want to hurt these boys? Why does he want to punish naughty boys? One of the first things he tells Finney is the black phone in the room hasn't worked since he was a child, which gives me the slight impression that this has something to do with abuse that he suffered during his childhood, but we're never given a clear answer on that. Thus, he remains this, like, live wire mystery that we can never fully understand. Two, why does naughty make me think there is something perverted going on? I mean, okay, there is, right? Like, we can agree, there is the perversion of childhood. There is the role-playing, the language regressing to our childhood language. But there's never something explicitly pedophilic happening. And I think this in part has to do with having a male protagonist. Because for whatever reason, stories with male protagonists are often much better at resisting the urge to sexualize the danger of what is happening without undermining predatory vibes. Like, one of the first things that the grabber does when he drops Finney on the bed in the basement is he kind of starts, like, stroking his hair and, like, gently brushing his bangs back. And then he cups Finney's face in his hands and says, "Don't worry, you're safe." And just gently assuring him, "I'm not gonna hurt you, you're safe, don't worry." Then later on, Finney wakes up at one point, and the grabber's just sitting in the room, just looking at him. And the grabber admits, like, "I just wanted to look at you. That's the only reason why I came down." And when he says that, Finney is obviously terrified, and the audience is terrified, but it doesn't fetishize the domination of him. It returns to the form of our childhood fairy tales. The bad guy wants to consume you, he wants to eat you, he wants to kill you. There is always language or actions being used that children already recognize. Thus, this all remains pointedly, indescribably terrifying. That indescribable is an important point to me because it reminds me of the way Stranger Danger was taught to me. Now, I was a child of the early 2000s. So according to my research, which is somewhat anecdotal and not fully annotated, the beginning of the end of Stranger Danger paranoia was in the early 2000s. Nonetheless, I do remember having to go to a couple of school assemblies where they warned us, never talk to a stranger because strangers want to hurt you. And that was it. There was never a discussion of what would happen to you. There was never a discussion of how to save yourself after you've been taken because guess what? Once you're taken, you're gone. You're just never coming back. And I once brought up this to one of my MFA friends because I think we were talking about horror stories or something, and I think he felt like this point wasn't actually very meaningful because he's like, well, yeah, they're not going to tell you. Why would they tell you that you might get raped and pimped out to pervs? It would have scared you and your parents into hysterics. Which, fair point, but listen, I was being terrorized with the idea that getting kidnapped wasn't a matter of if, but when, and that my entire existence would be gone if I made one mistake or if something out of my control with a stranger happened, that someone else had the power in a situation, and all I could do was just not be in the wrong place at the wrong time. So, I was already terrorized. And anyway, you're introducing this horrifying prompt to children that someone wants to hurt you, and you have very little that you can do to protect yourself from it. And if they hurt you, that's it, you're gone. Like, a prompt, no explanation. What do they want from us? Why are they taking us? Why me? That's why in fairy tales, I think that's why often the only thing we can really say is they want to eat you. Because what do they want from us? That's the only thing that's in our language to make sense. And honestly, I think that all of this is part of why childhood is often remembered by people as kind of safely terrifying, because you were very contained. You know, you were often under the watch of your parents or family or community. But outside of this bubble that you were in is nothing but danger. And let's not forget, it's actually far more likely that you will be hurt by somebody who you knew intimately. The safety has already been infiltrated. The call's coming from inside the house. It's already too late. And you know, the fox who travels actually did kind of touch on this, because the fox had earned the trust of the mother before he stole her child. And in the Black Phone, the grabber's identity is ultimately a mystery. But we do see shots of his black truck milling around the neighborhood long before he steals Finney. And this has that kind of John Carpenter Halloween vibe, the effect of, you know, the idea that the monster's already lurking all around you. It's an omniscient presence. The last thing I want to discuss with these stories is the role on perspective. Now, not to be a person who constantly mentions that I'm in an MFA program, but I'm in an MFA program. And in the MFA program, we are often told to consider perspective and point of view when writing. So let's circle back to a question I had for the fox. Why do we identify with him when we definitely condemn roasting a child for dinner? Well, he's our start point and our exit point from the story. He is the only character that talks directly to us. He is our protagonist. And honestly, for a good part of the story, you would just think he was a trickster. Like, that's often in fairy tales you do get the character who's like a bit of a trickster and a bit mischievous, but not a bad guy. But like my client mentioned, we don't want him to succeed in eating the little boy, and we're very happy when the boy escapes. I also think that, you know, with the fox as a guide point through the story, we're happy that he doesn't actually die in the end. He's chased into a hole, and then he bemoans his greediness, and that's his comeuppance for getting a bit ahead of himself, I guess. But the grabber is killed by Finney in the most rewarding, the definition of setup and payoff. I loved it. It was great. And we're happy he dies. And despite what the advertising of this movie might make you believe, the grabber actually has very little screen time. He's basically an enigma, and the story and point of view is always through Finney when we're in that house. It is never the grabber's point of view. And one reason why I love this is because I think we've had enough crime movies where the point of view is the murderer and the victim is window dressing. One thing I've always loved about abduction narratives is the fact that we can see it through the eyes of the victim, and that they often do get a happy ending of escaping. And because Finney is our point of view character, we will never fully understand the motivations of the grabber. Now, like I said, there's this read that the grabber is reenacting abuse, and there's the read of pedophilia. But there's nothing that'll give you a whiff of compassion for him, because he's only filtered to us how Finney sees him, which is no matter what, even the scenes where he's saying, "I kind of want to let you go," he's terrifying. And, okay, I hesitate to bring this up because I don't know if the enigma works. If the grabber as an enigma that we barely get to access and don't fully understand, it works. It's great. But I don't want to say no notes, because I do have this desire for a slightly different movie where we cut out the sister plotline, we get rid of that psychic stuff, and we get more exchanges between Finney and the grabber. It's also because we could do that, because honestly the sister's psychic abilities didn't actually save him in the end. Finney saved himself, which I was very relieved about. And I think it would have just been interesting to get more of the grabber's psyche and more of Finney trying to figure out how to navigate it and understand it. But like I said, it works well as an enigma, so I'm not really complaining. Anyway, I've got some spare time, so I'm gonna go get ready for work. I hope you enjoyed this dissection of pop culture and the lived experience and the ever mysterious haunting childhood. My new essay challenge is, I don't know, find a way to make Finney relate to Holden Caulfield. I don't know.